Gamer Buddies podcast, where we tell it like it was and is. This is Dan Vikstrom here today with Rick Reed, of course, and we're going to talk about 60s TV today. We have some common favorite shows that we watched back in the 60s, and we're just going to go over and talk about some of our favorite shows. Rick, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Dan. I'm glad we're talking about this today because as kids, we grew up watching Westerns and cartoons and some variety shows. And all of a sudden, we're 9, 10 years old in the 60s, and there's different kinds of shows that kind of changed the landscape. And excited to talk about some of those shows that I know hit me and I know they hit you. So let's start with one that was kind of campy and fun. It was Batman. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
The Batmobile.
Yep.
Yeah, it changed the whole culture of the day.
You heard that on TV, then you'd come running to the TV if you heard the theme song.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And-
what do you remember about Batman?
Well, the thing I liked about it is that there were 2 episodes a week, and there'd always be a cliffhanger after the first episode, like Batman's ready to get eaten by some big machine or something, and it's like, oh, it looks like it's curtains for the dynamic duo.
The narrator was really great, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, and all the bam, boom, kapow graphics they put up, and the villains were really good too. And I know it was popular show because a lot of the stars of the days wanted to do cameos or guest appearances on the show. It was different. It was very campy. It wasn't dark and everything like that, like Batman is now with the Dark Knight and everything. It was fun stuff for us kids growing up.
Yeah, and we were kids that grew up on comic books, and it was based on the DC comic book character Batman. And the characters, of course, you had Adam West, who played Batman, also the alias Bruce Wayne. And then you had Burt Ward, who played Robin, and his youthful ward, Dick Grayson. Alan Napier played Alfred. Neil Hamilton played the Commissioner Gordon. And Stafford Rep played Chief O'Hara, chief of the Gotham City Police Force. And Madge Blake, who did she play?
Oh, Aunt Harriet.
And Madge Blake also played Larry Mondello's mother, the nervous mother on Leave It to Beaver.
That's right. So she had already done that role. And when did Beaver end? What year was it?
1963.
So now this was Batman came
66.
out 66 through 8. I was reading an article last night that you sent me about these shows, and the shows were kind of changing a little bit from the Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver type shows into some stuff a little more edgy as we got into the mid 60s here. But the thing I liked about, the big stars, I think, on Batman, besides, of course, Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin, were the villains. Who was your favorite villain, Rick?
I have to say that, well, I like Catwoman. There was Julie Newmar, there was Eartha Kitt, and Lee Merriweather. And there's a little
who's
more.
Your favorite Catwoman then?
I really liked Julie Newmar, and Eartha Kitt put a real innuendo into that.
Oh, Catwoman. Catwoman, will you never learn?
And Lee Merriweather was great too. They're all pretty, very pretty, and they gave Batman a run for his money for sure. I got a kick out of the way Cesar Romero played the Joker.
Hello, kids.
And as a kid, you didn't really notice it, but as an adult, you notice on the reruns, he had his signature mustache underneath the makeup. He didn't even take off his mustache, They just put white on it, white theater pancake makeup, and then made a big, huge mouth.
God,
So,
I don't remember that. That's funny.
Yeah.
My favorite was the Riddler, Frank Gorshin.
Yeah.
With his laugh, And these actors, it had to be just great roles for them because they could really play up the evilness of their character, and they all did a great job. Burgess Meredith, of course, who went on to play Rocky's trainer. God, what was his name?
Mick. Cut me.
Yeah.
Cut me, Mick. I got to say another thing about Frank Gorshin. If you remember in the beginning, he wore the leotards, the green leotards and everything. He didn't like that. So he ended up having, remember the green tailored suit that he wore with the
Yes.
bowler hat and a little bit more stylish. But that was Frank Gorshin's input. They're just great villains. And it's funny how on the cliffhangers, you're little kids and you know they're going to be okay, but you kind of thought maybe they're not going to be.
Tune in tomorrow. Same cat time, same cat channel.
It was exciting as a 9-year-old to watch that.
That had to really jack up the ratings to have the cliffhanger. And then did they play the resolution episode the next night? Wasn't it? Didn't they do 2 a week?
Yeah, they did a couple a week. Well, they had 120 episodes, Dan, from 66 to 68. You know, the Pow, Bam, Zowies they had 2 episodes a week. And you're right, stars were clamoring to be on there. And Vincent Price was on there.
He played the Mad Hatter. Who did he play?
Oh, Egghead.
Vic-
Egghead.
Egghead. Mr. Freeze was played by Victor Buono, wasn't he?
No, he was King Tut.
Oh, that's right. He was King Tut.
It was Otto Preminger played Mr. Freeze. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's big time. That's big time having him on.
The big director, yeah.
Yeah. So Batman had a real effect. The color TVs were becoming more and more prevalent in the homes in America. And it was just fun to see all those different colors, the cartoony fight scenes, the bam, pow, kapows. Yeah, just a lot of fun as a kid to watch that. They always had the henchmen, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
The henchmen that used to get up in the fight scenes. You can't forget Yvonne Craig as Batgirl Barbara Gordon.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yep. That was come in on the second season or third season. I know she wasn't in there on the first number of episodes, at least.
Yeah, I couldn't. I think it's probably third season.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Batmobile, which was iconic design. What was it? Richard something that the automobile designer designed that. And that's still an iconic, probably very valuable collectible automobile right now.
Absolutely. And then you had William Dozer was the narrator, the Desmond Doomsday.
Tune in tomorrow. Same cat time, same cat channel.
Just a great show. Let's talk about another show that had an effect, one that was kind of an adventure cartoon series, Jonny Quest. I really want to talk about Jonny Quest because I know you really enjoyed Jonny Quest, and I did too. That was a departure from normal cartoons. They were taking advantage of or trying to capitalize on the sci-fi action thrillers, and the animation was different than anything we had seen. They tried to take people and make them look more realistic instead of cartoonish. And the only character on there that was still cartoonish was the dog Bandit. You had Dr. Quest, Dr. Quentin Quest. You had Race Bannon, who was a government agent assigned to protect Dr. Quest. And they had an adopted friend from Calcutta named Haji, right?
Yep, you're right though. I liked the show because they tried to make it realistic, the characters and the the cool like hovercraft that they flew around in and the jungle scenes. So that was what was to me what was compelling about it. Because you had real bad guys, and they did a really good job on just communicating the whole change in genre as far as the realisticness of the cartoons. I know Tim Matheson played the voice of Jonny Quest. He went on to be Otter in Animal House and had a long Hollywood career. So he was a child actor and had a long career in Hollywood.
Yeah, and Haji was voiced by Danny Bravo, and Dr. Quest he had a couple of voice actors. He had John Stevenson as the voice, and then Don Messick. And of course, Race Bannon was probably one of the coolest characters ever.
Kind of figured you'd say that.
That was Mike Road. And the bark of Bandit was done by Don Messick as well as, Dr. Quest. So
What do you think, Race?
Really a cool show. It took advantage of the James Bond intrigue adventure And the soundtrack on there during the chase scenes and all that were really well done.
It was very successful. I wanted to jump on the bandwagon, including the cartoon industry in Hollywood. So.
That changed the cartoon industry as well. And you mentioned the James Bond bandwagon. You had a show called The Wild Wild West, which I loved. It was basically James Bond in the Old West. And it was a cool show because it had gadgets, futuristic gadgets. It had a lot of cool colors in it. Again, colored TV was more prevalent. So whenever somebody would get gassed, one of the bad guys would gas James West and Artemis Gordon, the main characters. There'd be a purple cloud or a green cloud that would come out. And it
Yeah.
was a great show. It was on the air from 1965 to 1969. And the Westerns were kind of losing their popularity. There'd been so many of them in the 50s and 60s. But they decided to just put James Bond on horseback, basically, right?
Right. Yep. And the, like you said, the gadgets was kind of James Bond just too, because the prop department had to have work hard on those things, because a lot of them, as my recollection, seem pretty intricate as far as weapons or timers or everything like that. And it's set in during President Grant's administration after the Civil War. And you're right, though. It is James Bond on horseback.
And Artemis Gordon, his associate, played by Ross Martin, was fantastic because his thing was deception, magic, and he would put makeup on and could play a lot of characters. So can you imagine being an actor on that show, having that role where every week you could play one or two different people to try to aid
Right.
Robert Conrad, James West, in foiling the bad guys? And let's talk about some of the bad guys, Dan. Those were just so cool.
Well, you had Dr. Miguelito Quixote Lovelace, who's played by the actor Michael Dunn. He was in 10 episodes. And Voltaire, played by Richard Keel. And didn't he end up being in the Bond movies as Jaws?
Yes.
Later in his career. So
Yeah.
big, huge hulking guy. He was his kind of Lovelace's silent giant bodyguard.
And Miguelito Loveless, he just always had escape routes. James West and Artemis Gordon would close in on him, and boom, all of a sudden there'd be a panel on the study wall that would open up and there'd be a trap door and he'd slide off. And so that's why he was able to be in so many episodes.
Yeah.
He was fabulous. And he also had an assistant named Antoinette, and she was in 6 of the episodes. And she was often seen playing a piano or a string instrument and singing with Lovelace. And in real life, those two, Michael Dunn and Phoebe Doran, actually had an act together where they sang together, a real life callback. So that's pretty cool.
Interesting. No, good bad guys. Victor Buono played Count Manzeppi. And Buono was kind of a flamboyant actor as it was, and he certainly was in the Wild Wild West episodes that he was in.
And he also took that to Batman as King Tut, like we talked about. He was one of my favorite bad guys, Victor Buono.
Oh, he looked evil. He looked bad in real life,
Maniacal. Yeah, so he was pretty cool. And he also played a different role in the pilot episode, and he also played in the more Wild Wild West as Dr. Henry Messenger, which was a parody of Henry Kissinger. So
yes,
the late great Victor Buono was on that show, and Robert Conrad actually did a lot of the stunts, his own stunts, mainly to speed up production, and he did get some injuries along the way. But great show, Wild Wild West.
yes.
And so the James Bond theme continued, Dan, we had a show that was a comedy, and it's one of my favorites of all time, called Get Smart. It was created by Buck Henry and the great, great Mel Brooks.
Yeah, missed it by that much.
All those catchphrases. So the premise of that whole show was you had this by the book bumbling secret agent, and he worked for Control.
So we never knew what the control letters
No,
signified. Chaos. We knew what that. Maybe we didn't know on that what that
what
signified.
happened was they left it vague on purpose, Control and Chaos. Like Man from Uncle, which is another show we'll talk about here, that stood for something.
Right.
And on here, this doesn't stand for anything. Mel Brooks and Buck Henry had the catchphrases, like you said, missed it by that much.
Missed it by that much.
Would you believe?
Would you believe?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Chief.
Sorry about that, Chief.
And loving it.
And loving it.
And they had a lot of shticks on there. Like they had the Cones of Silence, which was a couple of plexiglass, I don't know what you call it, just plexiglass who dropped down from the ceiling because they wanted to talk in privacy. And the joke on that was they couldn't hear each other talking in the plexiglass tube with the little half circles around them, that they'd have to yell. And ironically, it wasn't secret at all.
Right. Right.
So that was always fun. They had Jaime the robot, and Agent 13. Remember, that was played by Ketchum. He was always in a mailbox or trash can.
Right.
He had the worst duty of all. Agent 99, the beautiful Barbara Feldon. They never really said her name.
We never found out her name.
Maxwell Smart, played by Don Adams, was one of the greatest characters. It's right on par with the Pink Panther character, Clouseau. Just loved
Yep.
it. So Control was a secret United States government counterintelligence agency based in D.C., fighting primarily chaos, the international organization of evil.
Chaos is basically what it was. It was chaos. They wanted.
Again, that kind of spoofed the James Bond movies. And that brings us to The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I really enjoyed that show. Dan, I don't know if you remember watching that as a kid.
Oh yeah, sure. The theme song, and you can kind of remember the theme songs on a lot of these shows too. They're kind of stuck in your mind, or if they're not, and you hear it, then you go, oh yeah. Yep, that's the Man from U.N.C.L.E. theme. But yeah, Robert Vaughn played Napoleon Solo, and he was an American agent, spy, and it was an international organization. So David McCallum played Ilya Kuryakin, who was, I believe, a Soviet or Russian agent, but they were on the same side, and
Right.
Became partners, and pretty much as the show progressed, they became kind of equal partners in the show. Alexander Waverly was the British chief, played by Leo G. Carroll, so he added a lot of gravitas to the role of their chief of intelligence.
He was perfectly cast, I should say that for
Right.
sure. He was so good. The creators purposely had an innocent character in every episode, and they were featured so the audience could identify with that character. And despite the many changes over the 4 seasons, the innocence did remain part of the formula. There's 105 episodes, Dan, and it was broadcast from 64 to 68, taking full advantage of the James Bond era. And I can remember that the rifles that they had, the guns they had that red circle on there. It was like an infrared sight on their guns. Do you remember that?
Kind of laser sighting way back then.
Well, it was very simplistic, but that was cool. I'd never seen a rifle like that or a gun like that. But David McCallum, who played Ilya Kuryakin, was such a cool character on there, suave and debonair, very spy-like. And later on, he played Ducky in NCIS. And one of the shows on NCIS, one of the team members on NCIS asked Gibbs, the head of the department, what do you think Ducky looked like when he was younger? And Gibbs said, "You look like Ilya Kuryakin."
That's great.
A lot of people probably didn't know that hat tip to David McCallum and Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah, I'm sure that went over the heads of a lot of people watching the show. Of course, the younger people younger than us. But yeah, he had a long run, and on that show is probably one of the show's NCIS's favorite characters. And
Yeah.
he was a favorite on Man from U.N.C.L.E. too. I think he was more of a heartthrob to the ladies because he was mysterious and blonde, foreign, and so he was a good fit in the Man from U.N.C.L.E.
And it's interesting because Robert Vaughn, Napoleon Solo, was meant to be a solo guy. When they had David McCallum on, the chemistry was so good, and the viewership really loved having that character, that Russian character on there, to try to go against the Cold War feeling of the times, that
Yeah,
they wrote him in for more and more parts. So,
yeah.
well, Dan, I think we got to wrap it up here. There's so much more. This is a gold mine talking about these old shows. And I
Oh,
know the things we talked about really hit home. Jonny Quest, Get Smart, Man from U.N.C.L.E, Wild Wild West, Batman.
there's so many more too, like sci-fi stuff, like Lost in Space, and of course Star Trek and wasn't there one called Land of the Giants? Remember that one?
Yeah, and Time Tunnel. In fact, Irwin Allen, he produced 4 of those shows: Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea,
Or
The Time Tunnel, Lost in Space, and Land of the Giants. What a great 4 series that he came up with to help capture our imaginations back in the day as young baby boomers just trying to figure things out, going out and reenacting, go out and play like your Napoleon Solo. And I just remember distinctively loving those shows. And still, you can find a lot of these shows on TV now, and it's so nostalgic to look back and watch those shows.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I love talking about it. If you are watching right now and you have any feedback or anything you want, go ahead. If you're watching on YouTube, go into the comments section and put your thoughts on there. What your favorite show was back in the day, because we want to talk more about this. If there's a show we didn't hit, you want us to cover, go ahead. So go on YouTube, like, share, hit that subscribe button. We're picking up some good traction here with this nostalgic baby boomer talk. We talk about things from the past and now. Listen to us on Spotify and Buzzsprout as well. Dan has been on the show before. We've talked about the South Pacific, World War II. We like to talk about history. And Dan, there's lots of stuff we can talk about coming up. What do you want to talk about in the future? Anything?
Well, I kind of like to talk about music in the future and the bands we liked and still like, and we can do that sometime too, Rick.
So we're always open to that. You can also email us at myboomerbuddies4@gmail.com. That's myboomerbuddies, the number 4 @gmail.com. We enjoy bringing you this content. We like emptying our heads of our thoughts and feelings of the times and our reaction. And some of the sources we looked at were like Wikipedia and a couple of magazine articles that just kind of triggered our minds. But a lot of this we just talked off the top of our head, and it's fun to do it that way. Just like you're at a party, you're sitting and having a cup of coffee. That's what we like to do.
All right. Sounds good. We'll see you around the block, buddy.
All right. Take care.
Bye bye.